Unmarried mothers on the march. The law calls their children bastards. Society regards the mothers as girls who have got into trouble. Each year, there are 70,000 new unmarried mothers like them in Britain. The permissive society which approves the sort of freedom it now finds them guilty of meets its obligation to them with a version of the Bastardy Act of 1872. Under that act, these girls and thousands like them are entitled to just 50 shillings a week from the fathers of their children. For everything else, they rely on public tolerance. This week, a new law starts its parliamentary process. It asks for the father's contribution to be raised to £5 a week and nothing more. These 5 girls think the new bill hardly reaches their problem, a problem they see increasing. 2 weeks ago, they formed themselves into an action group. Their aim is to change society's attitude to the unmarried mother. They call themselves Mothers in Action.
If you are an unmarried mother, you've got to be very strong-willed. You've got to force your way along through life. You mustn't let people tread on you, because that's the end. You've just got to go on and go on and go on and fight and fight and fight until you get the best for yourself. Till you get adequate accommodation, till you get a good job, till you get a place in a nursery. You've got to fight. Right, ladies. I think we actually need further chat. Let's go on to the first item on the agenda, minutes of the last meeting.
This is where the battle is being planned, in the North London flat of one of the girls. With most of the children briefly off their hands for the afternoon nap in the bedroom next door, Mothers in Action get down to their 3rd Sunday afternoon planning session. Procedure isn't exactly strict. Aims and methods seem a little blurred. Planning a national campaign is in danger of draining away around this table in gossip over mutual hardships, and their earnest demands are bound to irritate a society which insists they have only themselves to blame. But there is a real determination to change things here, forged out of a genuine indignation.
They can't. I mean, most charitable mother and baby homes, all they're interested in is trying to pump religion into you and reform you because you are a harlot.
It's a bit late to start telling you.
Yes, but listen, I mean, I didn't have religion pumped into me. I mean, admittedly, they had a little try.
But I don't, in the hospital that we were in, we were allowed to stay until the child was 18 months old. We feel that this is too long. The mother gets far too secure. They think, oh, I don't really want to go out and find myself somewhere to live. Jackie, get on with your breakfast. You've got to go to school.
Cathy and Kate did find somewhere to live with their children, after writing to more than 60 charitable organisations. 7:45 a.m. Breakfast time in their shared South London terrace house in an almost wordless but well-practiced routine. It has to be, to get Jackie, aged 18 months, and Maurice, aged 16 months, off to nursery school, in time for Kate to get to work and Cathy to go to an interview for a job. It's at this chilly, practical level that Mothers in Action's campaign is hammered out.
It is terribly difficult to find adequate accommodation. You go to the door, you knock on the door and say, I see you have a flat advertised. And they say, is it just you? And you say, yes. And they say, oh, you're irresponsible. There's no man to pay the rent. And you've got a child and this will disturb the neighbours. We don't want you. And the door slams in your face.
Help with housing and nursery facilities. Postal delivery of fathers' affiliation payments rather than embarrassing visits to court to collect them. More humane court proceedings to establish paternity without demanding a public admission of their sex lives. These are the sort of practical needs which mould the campaign of Mothers in Action.
We decided to form a pressure group. This is the whole idea, that we will try to put pressure on the government to change the laws which make it very difficult for unmarried mothers to live a normal life. And the illegitimate children in particular, because they suffer so much by the present laws.
What happened to prove that Jackie's father was Peter?
Well, it was quite ridiculous. We both went into court and we sat down, and the magistrate's clerk said to me, you say this man is the father of your child? And I said, yes. And they said to him, are you the father of your child? And he said, yes. And then they said, prove it. And we had to go through all the gory details, bring out all the letters, all the witnesses, so that they could be satisfied that he was the father of the child, and he'd admitted it.
Why did you have Jackie?
Well, because I wanted her in a strange sort of way. I didn't want an abortion at all, because personally I've got very strong views on abortion. That abortion is murder, in whatever nice phrases you like to put it in, it is murder, and this is all against my personal feelings.
What did Jackie's father say when he knew you were pregnant?
Oh, he said, "Don't worry, dear, I'll look after you." But he didn't. He's looked after me in as much, looked after Jackie in as much as he's paid, you know, the affiliation order regularly since her birth. But as far as any personal contact, that ceased when I was about 3 months pregnant. That was it.
Did you love him?
Yes, I did.
And he?
I don't really know. I don't think so. I thought so at the time, but obviously I thought wrongly.
Would you do it again?
Well, if I had enough money to support 4 or 5 more children, I would love to have 2 more children, because I absolutely adore them.
Even though they're illegitimate?
Yes. As long as I could provide for them adequately myself, yes, I would. But I can't, so I won't at the moment.
So, do you have any regrets?
If it had never happened, I wouldn't have wished it to happen. But as it has happened, I have no regrets.
Are you bitter because Peter left you?
At first I was bitter. I was bitter to the extent I used to write him nasty letters but never post them. But now that has worn off completely. All my bitterness has worked out of my system. Through thinking and thinking about it, until now there's just nothing. It's a sort of a numbness.
No, I don't resent it. It's partially my own fault, so I'll carry the burden.
Why didn't you marry your baby's father?
Because he was very unstable. And, you know, it was just hopeless. If I had married him, I could have ended up with, say, 3 or 4 children, then he probably would have run away. Because he was so unstable. He was always running away and coming back and so on. And it wouldn't have worked. And it's not very good for a child whose father is here today, gone tomorrow. I think it can have a drastic effect on them.
Is it better than to bring up a baby without a father?
I think so, under those circumstances. Although children should have fathers, but they should be good fathers.
Does this make you bitter towards other men?
No, but I'm very wary of them.
Why?
Because I have to size them up. It seems funny, that. But it's just one of those things.
Does this affect your attitude to marriage? Do you want
In
to
a
get
way,
married?
yes, well, I do in a way, but I want to be very careful this time. Make certain I pick the right person before anything else.
Are you scared?
Scared of what?
Responsibility?
No, I'm not really scared. The only thing frightens me is if I fail, but I hope I don't.
Failure or success as an unmarried mother depends very considerably on the local nursery. Without a nursery to park the child during working hours, the mother is stuck in the house and on the dole. Kathy had to wait 4.5 months before getting a precious place in this nursery.
This is one of the things we're campaigning for, yes, is more nurseries, or to expand the present nurseries. And also to have more realistic hours of opening. I'm very lucky in that the nursery, the local nursery, is open from 8 in the morning till 6 at night. But very many nurseries aren't. They close at 5:30. Well, unless you work on the doorstep, it is very difficult for a mother to rush back from her job to pick up the child. And most nurseries, I believe, are on a working system that they close at 5:30 or 5:15.
The fight for somewhere to live, the fight for a nursery place, the fight for money to live on. These are all overlaid on the basic struggle to keep your child. This is Barbara's fight now for her son Richard.
Our children are singled out and called illegitimate, which is an absolutely ridiculous term. How you can possibly be the illegitimate child of your mother? I mean, it's so absurd. When the more you go into it, the more ridiculous it gets. A child cannot be the illegitimate child of its mother. It's the child of its mother, if you see what I mean. And in order to make the child legitimate, you have to go through this ridiculous farce of adopting the child, who then becomes your adoptive child and therefore is legitimate. And I think anyone who thinks about this for 5 minutes would agree that the whole situation is completely ridiculous.
What can mothers in action really do?
Well, we can put pressure on people. You see, before now, no unmarried mother has ever spoken up for herself. It's something you keep quiet about. You know, it's a sort of terrible secret that you've got a child. When you look at it logically, why should it be? You have a child. This is a marvellous thing. You're fortunate to have a child. I mean, there are lots of people who want to have children, and they can't have them. That's why they adopt. And nobody says, you know, isn't that awful? They say, oh, how wonderful, you know, that they've adopted a child. So why shouldn't you be wonderful? Because you're keeping your child. You want your child. You want the best for your child.
But what makes you think that you 5 have got the experience to get this?
Well, we're all, you say we 5. Well, who starts any sort of action group for anything at all? Just a few people who feel strongly about something. And then they can draw in other people who are also interested.
Barbara, you mentioned that you brought up your child on your own. Why didn't you marry his father?
This is very complicated. I'm not going to go into this because it's a personal matter. But let's say that we agreed not to marry. It was easier.
Is it fair, do you think, to the child to bring him up on your own?
Very much fairer than having an unhappy marriage, which she sees break up.
But do you think that a fatherless child is going to grow up as a stable child?
Well, that depends very much on the mother and on the social surroundings and so on. I mean, if the child is brought up to feel that he is a person apart because he hasn't got a father, then of course he'll be unstable. He'll feel inferior to other children with fathers. But he's been brought up to know he has got a father. He knows he's got a father. He's got pictures of his father writes to us. But we're not married. And he knows that. I've always brought him up to understand that. And therefore he doesn't feel strange.
Has it affected your attitude to men?
No. Quite frankly, I've never been terribly interested in men.
But then why did you have Richard? Because
I loved his father. I mean, he really has been the only man I would ever consider marrying. There isn't anybody, there's never been anybody else. I've never been interested in anybody else. On the, sort of the idea of living with someone permanently. I just wouldn't consider it now.
But what about now?
No, I don't want to get married. There's no advantages. You know, his mummy isn't married, and I'm a miss. I never called myself Mrs. And I object very strongly to having letters addressed to Mrs. Because I'm Miss. That's my legal status. I'm Miss. I'm not Mrs. Until the law changes. As one day it probably will, and they'll all be called Mrs. Just as all men are called Mr. If you think of it, if you haven't got a child, your life is pretty empty. You know, the thought of never having a child is an awful one. But then on the other hand, when you think of the disadvantages there are in bringing up a child on your own, I don't think I'd ever actually planned to have, to have a child. But I mean, as he occurred, he occurred.
Do you regret having him?
Not at all, no, not at all. No, I can't, naturally I can't envisage life without him. But despite all the drawbacks, to have a child of your own is a marvellous thing.
That's a mummy.
This is Mummy, yes.
Still a mummy.
Junida is 22, a Commonwealth student and another mother in action.
Body. Some pussycat.
Her daughter Jessica is 2.5.
Thank you.
Junida's studies for her final exams are crammed in around Jessica's daily routine at the local nursery.
I think she does know it because, one day she came back from school, from the nursery. She's learned a word, bastard, not knowing what it was all about, She said, one day she was very angry with me. She said, Mummy, you bastard. So I said to her, you shut up. You don't know anything about it. My parents are married, but yours aren't, When we were just joking, but I want her, to know so that when she grows up, if somebody were to say to her, you are a bastard, she'd say yes, and that would be the end of it. Instead of coming back to me, instead of saying, what is a bastard, Mummy, and getting all sort of unhappy about it.
You haven't lived by society's rules, and why should you expect society to foot the bill now?
What are societies? I mean, the rules. The society is so permissive nowadays. It's just ridiculous. They are very permissive where sex and everything is concerned, and yet they're not permissive enough where the result of the sex is concerned. I mean, you know, girls and boys go to bed together. People know. I mean, practically 1 in every 2 girls, you know, make love and go to bed with other men. And yet, as soon as there's a pregnancy, the girl is immediately punished when she tries to bring the child up, you know.
How do you mean she's punished?
Well, she's punished. She's regarded as either the poor, brave thing, or, oh, that's a sinful girl, don't mix with her, well, you've enjoyed yourself, so now pay for it, you know, that kind of thing. We don't mind paying for it, but we don't want our child to pay. I mean, she's, you know, any child is just an innocent bystander, you know, a result of the relationship, and the child shouldn't be punished.
You seem still slightly bitter, and you're a bit upset still. Are you sure you're not using the baby to beat the world? Isn't she excused?
No. Let me think carefully so I can answer your question honestly. I'm not bitter at Richard anymore, you know, for treating me badly. I think he treated me badly. I'm not sure. Maybe he has an excuse. Maybe I was bad. But I am bitter for Jessica, not for myself anymore. You know, I have to fight for her because I feel she's a child. She deserves, you know, anything that other children have. You know, a child is a child, whether the parents are married or not. And if I'm bitter at the world, then it's because of this discrimination towards illegitimate children.
Why then, if you want to fight for Jessica, didn't you take the child's father to court?
Well, because it would be disastrous for his career if I were to do so, because the barrister, you know, I mean, I've been advised against it, but taking him to court, you know, wouldn't help in any way, because £2.10 is all that I can get. I mean, what can you do?
Do you go to bed with people now?
Sometimes, you know, I would sort of go steadily with somebody for 2 or 3 months, you know, somebody I like. It's very difficult. I mean, you can't abstain from it. You know, it's impossible if you want to be a normal human being.
How did you become involved with Mothers in Action?
Well, you know, after I had this whole trouble with Richard, I started to read up the laws, you know, and I found it so stupid, inadequate, that I started to write to all kinds of MPs in the newspapers, usually getting very polite letters for saying they feel sorry, but, you know, that's it. And then one MP, you know, I got some kind of help from, Mr. Quinton Hogg. I mean, he refused to see me. You know, he was at first very abrupt and everything like that. And then, you know, he made me look up. One day he wrote me a letter asking me to look up the laws. And I looked it up and I wrote to him and gave it to his clerk and things like that. And then, about 2 days later, he, you know, wrote me a note saying that he thought something could be done about it.
That something was the private members' bill to double affiliation payments to £5, which Quintin Hogg is piloting through Parliament this week. Mothers in Action think the bill is too narrow and will block more sweeping improvements.
Geneva.
How do you do? How do you do?
Barbara.
How do you do?
Shirley. Kathy.
Oh, yes.
So World in Action invited Quintin Hogg to talk with them about their criticisms. He met them on their own ground in Shirley's Kentish town flat.
Mr. Hogg, how is your bill going to help the unmarried mother?
Well, it is only dealing with the question of amounts. There are a number of separate other questions which trouble them.
But the amount, of course, is the same maximum as is given to married women and guardians. And it will increase the maximum at once by doubling the maximum. And it will also provide a a power in the Home Secretary with the approval of Parliament to increase it from time to time, either in accordance with different social ideas or in accordance with the value of money. This is a private member's bill, and you've got to remember that a private member has very limited resources at his command and a very limited time to get the bill through. And the result is you must do what you can rather than what you want in this field.
The number of illegitimate children increasing now is, you know, the rate is so high that the state cannot ignore these children altogether.
It doesn't ignore it altogether, but I think you ought to recognize your own responsibilities in the matter too.
We do, and we're doing all we can.
Mr. Hogg, there are over 350,000 single women in this country at the present moment with a child under 16, for whom she has sole responsibility.
I well accept this, and it's a very terrible thing.
Include the divorced, separated, or deserted wives
No, I
of
fully
children.
accept it.
It's an enormous figure, really.
It's a very large figure indeed.
Most councils provide very inadequate nursery accommodation. It's open for very restricted hours, which means you can't really do a full-time office job and keep the child at a nursery. And I think that this situation is absolutely ridiculous. This means that you've just got to stay at home.
But I do recognize that, that there's a great demand for nursery accommodation, and there has been for a very long time. It's no good saying that this and this alone is the only thing that the wretched councils have to provide.
Yes,
they have to provide a whole range of social services, and you've got to weigh one thing against another, otherwise you'll go completely over the
Yes, but
what you're saying in practice is that those of us who pay taxes, and that includes most people, have got to pay towards the upkeep of your family. And some of us think that this is not primarily responsibility for us, except through the ordinary social services.
Yes, and the point is that we are all voluntarily at work. We could stay at home and live on social security if we so wished until our children were 16 years of age. And in fact, we choose to go out to work and therefore take a great burden off the back of the taxpayer.
Well, you choose to go out to work presumably because you think it's a better way of life and because you feel a sense of responsibility, and this is right. It's also right that the father of the child should pay, and it's also right that you should have social security to fall back upon. But I very much question whether you'd get public opinion behind you in demanding an allowance over and above that. If you did, of course, it could be done at a cost. Well, the trouble about all these claims on the public purse is that no one of them would do the country damage, but collectively they'd ruin it.
Yes, but these children are the future. They are the future.
Yes, but you brought them into the world.
I know we
asking
did.
us.
Oh, we brought them into the world, but they had the same rights as every other child, that they
Well,
should be able to grow up with mental
yes,
and physical health intact.
Parents must learn a certain responsibility towards their
We
children.
have. We have all kept our children. We haven't just put them into care.
No, I'm not blaming you.
We can't
but,
do away with it.
Only saying that you've got to get a certain amount of public opinion behind you before you can expect them, other people, to pay this extent. Because what you're ultimately saying is, we brought the child into the world, you shall pay it.
No, we're not
No,
saying
no,
that
no.
at all. No, we're not saying this. We are all in full-time employment. We are all supporting our
And
children.
we pay taxes.
And we pay taxes.
And you pay taxes.
And national insurance.
Certainly you do. Certainly you do. But what you're ultimately saying to the taxpayer, whoever he may be or she may be, indeed to everybody, is we brought the child into the world, but we ought to be given an allowance by you for keeping it.
No,
Well, now,
no,
this is-
no.
This is what it amounts to, and there's no getting away from it. This is the reality of the situation.
I think, Mr. Hogg, you will find, in general, people will support you in this. They want to see the children brought up decently, and I think, generally speaking, people feel, you know, that it should be done.
You say that, but I do notice from my constituents that when taxes go on, and that's what it means, or rates go on, and that's what it means too, they complain, and they complain of me as their member for not keeping the taxes and the rates down.
When it's reduced to this unsentimental level of keeping the rates down, the problem of assessing priorities tends to be determined by how close you are to the need. These mothers are as close as they can get, and it's hardly surprising that this need obsesses their lives and makes them fight back. It's equally unsurprising that the society of ratepayers remains to be convinced. The permissive society quickly loses its good humour when permission goes sour and the tax bill arrives. Then it looks much like any other group when confronted by members who have broken the rules. But people still have a sneaking admiration for an old-fashioned fighter. Mothers in Action will certainly provide that.
We've never had a group of unmarried mothers who have been who have done something together. Never. There's never been such a thing in this country.
But what makes you think you can do it where nobody else
Well,
has
we can
succeeded?
have a go, can't we? We can have a try.